You are overweight for all of your childhood and most of your 20s, and then one day you decide it's time to make a change. Enough is enough. That was me. I lost 40 pounds. I looked and felt the best I ever had. I was essentially living my best life, but then everything changed. I became one of the 80% of women that are diagnosed with uterine fibroids before the age of 50. Not only did I have fibroids on my uterus, but I had a large cyst on my ovaries. This would cause debilitating pain during my menstrual cycle to the point where I was approved intermittent medical leave 3 to 4 days every month. The pain was severe, and as I simultaneously worked a job in children's protective services that was stressful, draining, and unfulfilling, I fell into depression. After several months of dealing with this and isolating myself from everyone, I had surgery to remove the fibroids, and it was a success, and I thought I was in the clear. But eventually, over time, they started to grow back. This made me concerned about future infertility. I'm not married, and I don't have any children, so I thought, how could this affect my future? And it didn't help that when you start to ease into your late 20s, for some reason, people think it's a really great idea to ask you questions like, why aren't you married yet? You don't want any children? When are you gonna have children? So to deal with some of these feelings that I was having, I started going to therapy. And after a few months of therapy, I was prescribed medication for anxiety and depression. The medication caused me to have some very scary thoughts of harming myself. So I stopped taking it without telling my therapist, and I stopped going to therapy. I started to cope in a very unhealthy way. I began binge eating. I would eat to the point where I felt physically sick. This led to significant weight gain. I actually ended up weighing more than I did before I lost the 40 pounds. This completely killed my confidence. I would go out of my way to avoid people, and I became obsessed with everything I hated about myself. I never told anyone that I was struggling with depression, and I never told anyone that I was binge eating. I remember a time when my brother came to my apartment because he fixed my car for me. And when he was done, he had grease or oil on his hands, and he wanted to come inside to wash them. And I tried to give every excuse not to let him in. I even frantically offered him hand sanitizer, which is absolutely ridiculous. I eventually let him in, and when he walked in, his eyes got so big. My place was trashed. There was fast food bags, dirty clothing, dirty dishes everywhere. It was the evidence that I wasn't taking care of myself. He didn't say anything about it, and neither did I. That was my opportunity to say that I'm not okay, I need help, but I didn't. He left, and we never talked about it again. Over time, I had another surgery to remove the fibroids, and it went well. But my medical issues did not stop there. I had a breast reduction almost a year later to address some significant back pain that I was having. And I also had these deep, dark, painful marks on my shoulders from my bra straps. After this surgery was when I learned that my skin does not heal well and does not respond well to bandages and sutures. I had an incision that would not heal. It continued to grow larger until it almost completely covered my right breast. It was the most excruciating pain that I've ever experienced. Prior to the breast reduction, I had interviewed for a job that I so desperately wanted, and I was offered the position, and I accepted. but I had to delay my start date because of my wound. Eventually, I started working much sooner than I should have. I was medically cleared to start working, but mentally, I was not ready. I didn't tell my boss or any of my coworkers about the issues that I was experiencing. I had an opportunity to travel to Europe my second week with the company, and I was going to be there for 8 days. But I was afraid to travel out of the country with this large open wound, so I went back and got several stitches. I traveled to Europe out of the country for 8 days with stitches, and my body was definitely telling me it was time for them to come out. I was in so much pain, but I said nothing to no one. I got back on a Saturday evening. I went back to work to the office Monday morning, and during my lunch hour, I went and got my stitches removed, and I returned to finish my workday. At this point, I didn't know if I was strong, stupid, prideful, or crazy. But one thing I knew for certain is that I started to develop feelings of hate towards God. I felt betrayed, forgotten. My foundation, my faith has always been my foundation, but I didn't understand why I was experiencing so much pain, both physically and mentally. I felt like I was going to lose my mind. I stopped going to church. I stopped praying. I wouldn't even acknowledge God. During my post-surgery issues, I stopped sleeping, and I became severely fatigued. I would get tired and winded from doing simple tasks like putting on my shoes, so I knew something wasn't right. I went back to the doctor, and I was diagnosed with Graves' disease, which was the cause of my hyperthyroidism. For those of you that aren't familiar with the thyroid function, I like to compare it to a car engine. If it doesn't function properly, neither do you. Over time, some of my symptoms were an increased heart rate. I would sweat profusely. I had tremors in my hands. My neck started to enlarge, and my eyes started to bulge. The physical changes in my appearance caused me to be extremely insecure. I would decline invites from family and friends for social outings, and if I did so happen to show up, I would refuse to take pictures, and it would turn into this back and forth because everyone loves to take pictures and post everything on social media these days. I was so frustrated. I remember calling my mother one day, crying hysterically, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't take it. My body does not feel like my own. And it scared her because for so long I was always so strong and I was always okay. She was so nervous that she sent my siblings to come check on me. She lived out of town, so she was frantic and worried. So they were calling me and stopping by, and it turned into this big ordeal, and I was so embarrassed. I know that it was out of love, but that was reinforcement for me that I needed to be dishonest about how I really felt. Because if I told people how miserable I was, they would pity me and they would stress about me. And that caused me more stress. Throughout this experience, I lost my confidence. I was filled with pride and shame, and I lost my faith. But I don't consider those to be my biggest failures. I did not ask for help. For years, and I do mean years, I lied to my very supportive family and friends and said I was okay. I was not okay. I suffered in silence.